My name is Sarah Liss. I am a Miami food writer, and I am excited to be here moderating a virtual conversation with actor, director, and producer Adam Freed from the movie Everything's Kosher, which is premiering at this year's festival. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
It
Thank you,
is so
Sarah.
great to
Thanks for
have
having
you. Now,
me.
you're coming to us from Germany.
Yes, I'm in Regensburg, Germany, where most of the film was filmed.
Fantastic. Okay. I will just start off by saying I enjoyed the film. I loved it. Um, I thought I was going to be watching something that was sort of like the Jewish The Bear,
Right.
where it was sort of going to be this crazy, thing inside of a restaurant, and people are going to be flying salamis and pastrami's at each other, and it actually ended up, pleasantly being something that was more of a heartfelt, really beautiful meditation. I felt on parental relationships, sibling relationships, and just really something that was a really deep emotional film. And yeah, I definitely I cried in some moments. So yeah, it was really, congrats on that. I think, for
Thank you.
achieving that. That's incredible. Before we get into the film, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask. You want to give us a little kind of quick backstory about you and how you came to filmmaking, and is this something you've been doing for a while? And I know you've made other films, but is this your first feature length documentary?
Yeah, so this is my first feature-length film, and what got me into, and obviously you've seen the film, what got me into filmmaking was I was walking down the street of Regensburg, Germany with my ex-wife, and she pointed to a building and said, that was a concentration camp.
Mm-hmm.
And that started my obsession. Once I landed in Germany, and I grew up Jewish, but when you live in Germany as a Jewish person, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and so that started my obsession with wanting to learn more about it and do these kind of short documentaries on really hidden concentration camps, or they were called subcamps, and that's kind of what led to me wanting to make the feature. And as we got into it, it kind of switched a little bit to focusing on food because of the foods that I was missing here. And yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That was such a fascinating moment in the film when you point out that this building called the Colosseum was this, what you called, a concentration camp, which is, for viewers who are not familiar with this idea of these sort of smaller sub concentration camps. I mean, we think of Auschwitz and we think of these, these places that were on the outskirts of towns and had complexes and barracks and things like that.
Yeah.
But this bit of history seems a bit unexplored.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the next projects I'm working on, is a series of all of that gets into these hidden camps because, yeah, like you said, everyone knows about Auschwitz, maybe Dachau. They don't know about the Colosseum building in Regensburg, or the prisoners from there came from a camp called Flossenburg, which was a work camp that was about an hour away from here. So once I started digging in to the history, you go down this rabbit hole, and it's pretty amazing. So I love the educational aspect of it, but when I made the decision to make Everything's Kosher, I did not want to make a Holocaust film. And you can tell it touches on
Mm-hmm.
some things a little bit, but I wanted to make a little for this film. I wanted to make much more of an upbeat, happier film with a lot of drama mixed in, and that gives it a nice mix.
Yeah, I do think you are very good at kind of keeping the mood light, while also digging deep emotionally. So you do have those moments where you also talk about walking along the cobblestone streets and seeing the embedded monuments that are in the paved stone
Yeah,
of those towns. That town that you're in Germany. I'm assuming it's all over Germany. Is that the case?
yeah, and they're called Stoppelsteine or
Mm-hmm.
Stoppelsteine, and I would walk out my front door to walk my dog every day, and I would see three of them, on my left. And there's about 250 of them in just my city here, and there's close to 100,000 maybe all around Europe. And most people don't even know what they are. So
Hmm.
I walk out my front door, and there's a stone for Simon Oberdorfer, and he was a Jewish businessman. He was killed in the Holocaust with his wife and brother-in-law. And every morning I would say hello. I would walk down the street, and again, when you live here as a Jewish person, I'm walking down the actual street where Kristallnacht actually happened.
Wow.
And those are really, I had to, when I first moved here, I had to reconcile in my head um, how to deal with that, because once you learn about these things, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Hmm.
And that was a big thing. And, what kind of tied in the food aspect was, walking into the Metzgerei, or means butcher, and they have butcher shops here. And I
Hmm.
walk in and I ask for a skirt steak, and they look at me like I'm crazy. They have
Mm.
no idea what it is. And I was
It's
like,
just not
no,
a cut that they have there.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it speaks to, it's the skirt steak was through history is kind of considered like a second class cut of meat.
Yeah, it's like the
And
cheapest steak you can get, right? Yeah.
right. And certain cultures wouldn't eat it. And the Jews, I believe, kind of adopted it as their own. And it's something I really missed, living here. And that's kind of what led to the whole deli concept as well. So
Hmm. Yeah, so I definitely want to get to that because I'm a food writer, and I know that food is so much more than just the act of eating. I mean, it's nourishment, but it's also its history and its family and its culture and it's all those things.
right.
I found that to be so fascinating. So at one point you say, so you want to open the deli because you miss the connection to Judaism. So for you, I guess you explore this a little bit. You didn't grow up religious. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of ritual, like even Shabbat and things like that. You
Right.
experience a Shabbat at it seems like an observant family's home in the film, and that was really beautiful. That was really
Yeah.
beautifully done. So for you, what was the connection for you to Judaism? Was it just the food? Was it the memories?
What's funny? You watch that Shabbat scene, and literally after that Shabbat scene, I realized, and I hadn't been to a Shabbat dinner in 30 years or so. And leaving that, I realized, how nice it was, and the family and the kids running around. And, I can walk into it reminded me of what it's like to walk into a Jewish home and be very welcomed,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really important to me. But so it was a combination of things of coming to Germany, being here, not really caring that much about my Jewish heritage, but then learning, about the history of the town. And there's a scene in the film where I'm playing with my daughter in it's a memorial to a synagogue that was destroyed, not in 1938 or 39, but in the 1500s.
Yeah.
And during the 1500s, all of the Jewish people were kicked out of the city, and the synagogue was destroyed. The Jewish quarter was destroyed. And today, they have a memorial of exactly where that synagogue was. So literally, I'm playing with my daughter in it, and it was a combination of all these things, the history, the memorials, and all that stuff, that drew me to the one synagogue in town,
Mm-hmm.
that I hadn't been in before I did the movie. And there were actually some scenes that we actually had to cut out. That I go into the synagogue for the first time. It just we didn't have the time for it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I wanted to focus more on the family issues and the deli. So it was a combination of a lot of things that really kind of reawakened my Jewish heritage. And by the end, I felt really proud. And to this day, I'm going into the synagogue on Saturdays. It's either the services are either in German and Hebrew, and I don't understand a lot of what's going on, but it's really impactful and powerful for me to even just sit there and realize what Jewish people have had to go through just to be able to worship. So it's still very powerful for me.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this town of Regensburg before watching your film. I've been to Germany a few times, actually, not even Berlin, but places like Dusseldorf and other kind of places that aren't even like the more kind of capital places. But is there a Jewish community there? Have you found your Jewish community since the film and since making the foray into the deli and that kind of thing?
Well, what's interesting, yes, I have found the the congregation there, and again, I don't a lot of them came from it's a Russian Orthodox synagogue,
Hmm.
so a lot of the members there came from Russia and Ukraine, really in like the 90s. So there's somewhere under 1,000 people, which seems like a decent size, but the town overall has about 140,000 people. And it's interesting though, because with what's going on today, the Jewish people here, they keep a very low profile, and
Hmm.
it's kind of sad, but it's kind of reality. And but when I go in there, I feel warm, I feel connected. Um, and what's funny is at the kiddush after the services, since they're Russian, a lot of them are Russian there, they drink a lot of vodka.
Hmm.
So they're doing shots of vodka along with the food, and by the end of the lunch, I'm feeling pretty loose, and
Yeah.
I can talk more in German with them, and it's nice.
I'm assuming there's some schmaltering involved.
A little bit, yes,
A little
yes,
bit, yeah. I could never eat that at the kiddush. Just not my
yeah,
taste.
yeah.
Um, so I thought it was interesting. You start the film. There's a quote from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, uh, right? The world is a very narrow bridge, but the important thing is not to veer off of it, right? Not
Right,
to.
never stop crossing.
Yes. So I was wondering why you are you very influenced by this Hasidic a rabbi, and why you chose to open the movie with that quote.
I'm not that familiar with him,
Hmm.
but for me, it made perfect sense because one of the main, um, Regensburg is a World Heritage Site
Hmm.
because it was settled by the Romans in 150 A.D. around. It was the northernmost fort of the Roman Empire at the time,
Hmm.
and they built one of the world's oldest stone bridges
Hmm.
across. And we had this beautiful drone footage of the bridge, and
Yeah.
it fits my background and my personality. Like I'm a risk taker. I moved to Germany without knowing anyone. I mean, I had my ex-wife who was from here, but yeah, that bridge kind of for me kind of signified, yeah, keep walking, keep moving, and that for me. That's what life is. It's learning, and that's kind of my thing of never stop crossing. I'm
Hmm.
crossing those bridges all the time. So that's kind of how that ended up there. And again, I love the drone shot that we did on it.
Yeah, the cinematography, I want to say, is gorgeous in this
Thank
film.
you.
Who's your cinematographer? Let's give a shout out. I mean, I just thought the shots were so beautiful.
Yeah, so Willie Laszlo and Johnny Stern were the two guys who did the camera work. And you know what's funny? It was really a ragtag crew of people who we put together. My friend Mike Harrigan, who helped co-direct some of the film, he knew some of these people. I knew some, and it started out with, okay, we'll just have one camera, and that's it. And then I liked the cinematography that Johnny did, so I said, okay, now we'll have two cameras. Well, if you're going to have two cameras, then you have to have, you really should have a sound person to make the
Hmm.
sound good. And then if you have sound and two cameras, you need a PA. And so the crew kind of grew and
Hmm.
grew. And yeah, they did for a no budget or a low budget film, they did an amazing job, and made it look really good.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, I love the opening sequence with the family photographs put in, throughout the city.
Yeah.
That was very artful, very beautiful. And then, even those shots inside the restaurant, when you kind of like you take over the restaurant, it's like you get inside the walk-in cooler, you really kind of get a sense for like the scale of the place, which actually looked like quite a spacious restaurant, I have to say.
Yeah.
But I know it's hard to film inside of an actual restaurant. It's very tight, I know. But you
Yeah.
guys, you guys do a good job of getting close on the action.
Well, like you said,
Yeah.
like this could have been there were a few different ways to take the film, and it could have been the Jewish Bear,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I mean, I went to what one of the things that I always say, there was someone looking down on us throughout this whole shoot, and I like to say it was, my mother,
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have permits,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't. I lucked out on, we had a luck on our side. The weather
Mm-hmm.
was always beautiful, even in the scene in that old castle ruin type of thing when it's kind of snowing and I'm talking
Yeah.
about my father.
I was wondering how you got the sound to work in that scene because I felt like that seemed really complicated with the snow.
It was, we had a sound guy, the boom
Mm-hmm.
mic is right, close to me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was, it's the editors did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But where were we? Oh, back to the restaurant. I was looking for places. I approached many places, and when you don't have, when you don't speak German that well, and even in this town, they speak what's called they speak Bayerisch,
Mm.
which is a Bavarian slang.
Okay.
So there's normal Hochdeutsch, which is normal High German, it's called,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's Bayerisch.
Wow.
So when you go approach people, Germans are very, they're in the U.S. If I could walk into a deli, they'd be like, "Hey, come on in and film us and everything." Germany is much different. Most people, the first answer is no. They don't want to be filmed. And it was a couple weeks before we're doing this, and I found a guy who had this restaurant, and he likes coming to the U.S. He's
Mm.
German, and he spent a lot of time in San Diego. So this was his restaurant, and I said, "Hey, I'm doing this, this pop up deli. Would you, can we work something out?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever you need."
Wow.
So that all worked out great, and it was real at the towards when my sister and I were prepping all that food. I mean, 4 hours I was cutting 50 pounds of meat,
Mm-hmm.
pastrami and the corned beef, and she's making the soup. And until people started showing up, I had no idea if it was going to fill up or not. So we got kind of lucky there.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, it's always like the moment you think like, okay, we built it. Are they gonna come?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but it looked like it was a hit. It looked like everyone was enjoying it.
It was great. It was great. They loved the food. They ate the skirt steak. I'd say 70% of the people liked the gefilte fish.
That's very high in my opinion. I'm
Right?
shocked. I'm shocked.
Right? So they liked it, and of course, I had to, we were editing. I was like, "Oh, that reaction of the, do you like the gefilte fish?" No,
Mm-hmm.
it was, it's just hilarious. It was perfect.
Yeah, it's a hard
So,
sell. I would never want to start off with the gefilte if I'm trying to convince people to come eat Jewish food.
right? Oh, I just thought it'd be hilarious too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, like when I'm talking to my German tutor about it, and she's like, "What's this
Gefilte. Jewish
gefilte?"
hamburger. What do you say? Fish hamburger?
I said, "It's like a fish hamburger, and it's
Yeah.
cold, and it's cold."
Oh God, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
no, but that was fascinating. Did you guys end up doing more pop-ups? Did you end up extending it? Did it become a
I've
thing?
I've done a few more pop-ups, but I like to say I'm still searching for the perfect location.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so and what's crazy is literally there was an open storefront in the Coliseum building where the sub camp
Wow.
was.
Yeah,
And I was like, if I did it anywhere, I would do it there because that would make for a great story, a great memorial.
for sure.
Yeah, so we'll
Well,
see.
yeah, full circle moment, I would say.
Exactly.
Um, wow, that's fascinating. I also felt that, okay, so you touch on this kind of like, can we be cycle breakers as, as adults who have gone through childhood situations and are
Right.
inheriting this childhood trauma In your case, it was, abandonment, and, what you felt was disappointment from parents. And then, but you were talking about how you had your grandparents, and there was this pattern you were recognizing in the family.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really powerful thing to have to explore. Can we be cycle breakers? How are we as this generation who recognizes this trauma but is now trying not to repeat it with our
Right.
children? And I think the whole sequence where you meet with your father, I found extremely powerful, very brave, honestly. um how was that for you? Like, did it take a long time to film that, or was just one day? It seems like it's just one day or 2 days.
Well, it was over 2 days, and yeah, it was a tough scene to film. But and there was a I went to and I say to my father, I went to a therapist before I came here because I did
Mm-hmm.
because I knew like the whole premise behind all that was one, like here I am living in Germany. I'm here to be with my daughter, and my father left us when we were 12, and here it is. My daughter at the time was 3 years old, and I'm like, okay, given, here I am in a foreign land, it's Germany, I'm Jewish, I miss my friends, all that stuff, but I can't leave. I don't want to leave. I love my daughter, as you can see from the film. And, I make the decision. I said, okay, I need to, and I hadn't seen my father in almost 9 or 10 years. And I said, I need to try to reconcile with him. So when we talked about doing the film, you know, one of the big things was calling him and saying, Dad, I'm making a film. Will you be in it? And if he says no, it's a completely different film, or maybe it doesn't get done at all. But he agreed to do it. And, we went to his house, and, over the course of 3 or 4 hours, we sat there, we talked, and the things that came out of his mouth were not the most pleasant thing, to hear. And that's why at the end of it, that night, I sat there alone, and I thought, and there's something that went off in my head. When him and I are talking, we're looking at those. I see the pictures of him as a child, right? And then going through the family history and finding out these things that I'd never known. Like my great grandmother put the kids, 5 kids into an orphanage, or the great grandfather. The mother, the great grandmother ran away, and I was light bulbs started going off in my head. And but after all that and seeing the pictures of him as a child, I was like, he's just a person, and after that full day of talking with him and filming and the emotional side of that, I just made a decision. I said, you know what? That's the best. I can't expect anything more. And when
Mm-hmm.
I moved that expectation aside, it allowed me, to forgive and move forward, because I'm not going to change him. I had to, as I say in the movie, I had to change me, and that was a huge epiphany moment for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so incredible to watch this very raw interaction between the two of you, and it was interesting. He was giving his perspective, and um, I did start to see his perspective a little bit, I think, as someone from his generation thinking, oh, I think I'm doing the right thing, or he thought he was doing the right thing, or whatever it was. And
Right,
just sort of the way that he went through that, but also dealing with his own sadness and however that might have processed through him. So yeah, I
right,
found it to be so fascinating and complicated. And I just love when, a film can really, I felt like, just it made me think about my own parental relationships,
right.
and then of course when you had this interaction with your sister. I thought that was also super interesting and moving, where you guys reconnect when you come to Chicago, and she kind of has a little bit of she gets at you a little bit,
Oh, yes, she does.
confrontation. Yeah, a confrontation, about kind of how she felt like she was treated by you. And I thought, wow, this is, also really powerful stuff. I mean, siblings have to work out things as adults. Sometimes it doesn't get resolved, stuff from childhood that just doesn't get resolved. and
Right.
we kind of take it into adulthood. But the idea that she comes and helps you, I thought was so beautiful and wonderful.
Oh yeah, and again, it's for me the big thing with this was breaking patterns, and that's what I
Right.
would do in the past. You know, if she or my father would get me angry, do something that I felt I was being slighted, I literally wouldn't talk to them for a year
You just
or
shut
three.
down. You just shut down.
I'd shut them out and shut them down
Mm.
instead of talking about it a little bit, being a little bit more direct. And maybe that was, part of the problem growing up is, we didn't talk about things, and there's a difference in, getting in a fight and the next day talking it out and then going, okay, let's move on. That's helpful for families versus someone gets offended and they don't talk for years. And I knew I had something really good when I would show it to people and they would open up to me and tell me their deepest dark. They would cry and they would tell me their deepest darkest family secret. And I said, as soon as people started doing that, I'd say, okay, we're on to something here. We have something that's that makes people think, and that
Hmm.
was really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I once heard this quote. It was something like, when it comes to making a work of art, do something so raw and so real that people are almost, it's like they don't want to look you in the eye afterwards because it's just been so real, and
Right.
they feel like you've shown them something. They're kind of like it's been that deep, so I think, you know I do think that you get there with that. It was something like, wow, this was so intimate and so real.
Yeah.
Just really shedding a light on that. So
Well, and it was interesting because one of my first ideas at the end was to put, kind of the movie fades to black and it says, call your mother, call your father, call your sister, call anyone.
yeah.
And I really wanted to put that there, but then we decided, you know what? Let people, don't guide people. Let them think, come up with their own thoughts, and they're going to think it.
Hmm.
And yeah, we hope that's one of the goals of the film.
Yeah, for sure. What are you working on now? You're working on this film about the micro, what sorry, what was the term?
Subcamps.
Subcamps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's interesting is, I mean, in the past few years of making this film and learning about the business side of making films, it's really difficult. And but I still have a story that I wanted to tell. When I came back to the US and would show the film and talk about it, and I also had a short film entitled The Walk.
Hmm.
And that's, I don't know if you've seen that, but that deals with walking around the city and the things I see in the camp and stuff. Um, I would show that to, I'd be doing talks in synagogues with 200 people. And I would say, does anyone know what a sub camp is? Or have you heard of this camp or that camp? No one raised their hand. And I said, that's an opportunity there to educate more. So, like we talked about, people know of Auschwitz, maybe Dachau, a few other. They don't know of camps in France and Italy and Croatia, and even Finland.
Wow.
And so I'm trying to work on a series that talks about specific camps in each one of these like 7 different countries around Europe because I think it'd be really really powerful.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, you do have that point where you look at the map and all those red dots and you say, okay, each one of these places, and that is just in your area of
That was
Germany or
just one camp. Every one of these main concentration camps or work camps had these sub camps, and that's what people don't realize was like Flossenburg. That's the work camp about an hour away from here. And what would happen was, um, the SS, they were like a criminal organization. They would loan out prisoners to cities or companies, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, every major company
wow.
had this slave labor, whether it's Jewish slave labor, and, people from Russia or the eastern part of Europe. Yeah, that's how they use this slave labor. And one of the things that I was always curious about was a little naive about was, well, why did they had these people doing work for them. Why were they starved and killed? And it was because they would just replace them and they had too many people. So that's another movie, and
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm hoping um, I can work on this. I've started working on the series. I filmed this one camp in Austria. That's fascinating. It's called Ebensee, and it's south of, it's in these beautiful Alps. And during the war, they were digging out, used prisoners, 26,000 prisoners, to dig out the inside of these mountains to put the V2 rocket program
Wow.
in there, inside of it. So there's miles and miles of these tunnels. And again, it's hidden in this little sleepy Austrian village that no one knows about. So, but I
Mm-hmm.
find it absolutely fascinating.
I also thought it was interesting how the woman who gave the tour of the Jewish quarter, well, A, wasn't Jewish and didn't give it in English. I guess, is there an audience for English to, I guess it was mostly for German speakers.
Yeah, there's most of the tours are given by German speaking people. And even, even the Germans who come visit here on vacations and things, they take the tour. This town has a ton of Jewish, a lot of Jewish history. Um, and, the line where she says, I ask if she was Jewish, and she says, I'm not, no, I'm not Jewish. You see my hair.
Yeah.
At first, I thought that was the funniest line. And then I was like, kind of a very, it could be construed as an anti-Semitic, I
Yeah.
don't know,
More
line or
stereotypical. Yeah. Sort of the idea of like,
yes,
I know plenty of Jews with blonde hair. So,
right,
yeah.
exactly. So I thought that was a very interesting line that she said. And yeah, but no, it's none of the Jewish people give tours here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how has been the response from your local, the people who are in the film and your town?
They
Have they
love it.
responded? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they love seeing the town, and the like I said, the Germans are different. They're more stoic. And it's very interesting showing the film to 100 Jewish people in the U.S. versus 100 people in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are still entertained by it, but it's a film, so people laugh at different jokes. For instance, when I ask the cake ladies if they have a sheet cake,
Mm-hmm.
they start laughing because they think I said something else.
Yeah.
They don't.
Well, your
Germans don't.
subtitle also says that. Yeah.
Right. Germans don't know what a sheet cake is.
Yeah.
So when I show them that, they don't laugh at that joke. That joke gets a ton of laughs in the US.
Right. Right.
So there's cultural differences.
Yeah. The bakery ladies were great. They were
Oh,
great.
they're so nice.
Yeah.
I still go to them every week. They give my daughter little cake pops, and they were super fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we covered it, and very fascinating. And I
Thank you.
encourage you to keep making these films because I think that you're telling very powerful stories, and I will look forward to seeing the next one.
Well, thank you. And I was honored to be included in the Miami Jewish Film Festival, and I'm really proud of that. So thanks again.